Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever, and I'm tremendously excited by this. Psyched to be with you, a new format for the show here at Blind Psyche. I'm incredibly excited. It's a pleasure and a privilege, as always, to be here with you, but not only with you, but today, my very special guest, Dr. Chrissy Cook. Thank you very much for joining us. Um, just a couple of quick notes for y'all if you're familiar with the usual Twitch setup of things. Alerts are going to be muted today, just stop any noise as are the sound commands. You can do exclamation mark guest in the chat if you want to find a quick link to Dr. Chrissy's Twitter page. You can find her there. Yeah, we're just going to be chatting for about an hour. There's a few questions. We're just going to be blabbing away. This is the first time I've done anything of this format, so apologies in advance if there are any issues, but just let us know in the chat if they are. We've tried to get things as best as we can, but otherwise, sit back, get yourself a beverage, and enjoy some great chat. If you don't know me, I'm Chris, Chump195. I'm here, the host of this channel and all its shenanigans. But to you, my special guest, who you are, what do you do, and where do you go when you're not around?
The last one down, but I can answer the first two. So I'm Chrissy Cook, Dr. Chrissy on Twitch usually, although I don't stream myself, but I guest pretty often on my dearest friend, Stream Chronicler, who's a English caster for the LCK, if you're a League fan. I am a postdoctoral researcher, so postdoc, and I'm coming to you live from Taipei. So we've got quite the distance happening. And where did I go when I'm not around? I mean, it's been the pandemic for so long. I feel like I'm always around, and I feel like I'm just here, and here I am. So
That's
I
fair.
didn't talk about what I research. I research. That's my research in a nutshell.
Okay, all right. So just okay. So you meant your postdoc. If you don't mind me asking, how recently did you finish the doctorate?
So I have probably one of the weirdest postdoc stories that you're going to come across. So this is actually my second postdoc, even though I technically graduated this January.
Okay.
So thanks to the pandemic, I realistically should have been graduating last year, probably around September-ish. But due to the whole situation, my graduation got pushed forward quite a bit. I actually finished a postdoc before I finished the doc part. Um, so it was a weird series of years. So this is technically my second postdoc, but I got my PhD in January of this year.
Okay, so that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. I mean, obviously, not to already curtail the chat, but for those that don't know already, I'm a budding PhD myself. I'm like 8 months in. Have you got any like well done on surviving? How did you do it?
So many Lindor truffles is the answer. I wish
That
I
is
had
that is
something better
not
and
a
healthy.
bad answer at all.
The amount of Lindor truffles I consumed in 4 years was truly this of legends. Like I feel like I got an honorary Swiss citizenship. Um, but other than Lindor truffles, I uh, I think the main thing is finding a balance, and especially between work and life, because that is so tricky to do. Now I was lucky. I did my PhD in the Netherlands, and PhD is purely research. There's no classes at all, and it's 4 years instead of the 3 year British PhD. So you get an extra year, and you have no classes. So I guess it was a little easier for me to find that balance than maybe someone in the British system, but try to strike it where you can. Be be my best advice, because you start to, especially at the end, you start to kind of measure your productivity in terms of your relationships, not in terms of your output. It's like, a good productive day where you can go to bed at night and feel good for yourself is a day where you're able to, in my case, spend the whole day playing Pandemic Legacy with your best friends, and it's not a day where you finish an article or you get a journalist. Uh, finding finding that, I think, is how I did that in literature.
Okay, that's pretty sound advice. I mean, I always try and pretend to myself that this type of thing is work, or at least try and frame it in that context. I'm like, look at me, I'm networking. Look at me, I'm streaming. I'm talking about mental health. This is important for stigmatization and psychology generally.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's a bit of a shoehorn, but vis-a-vis.
Yeah,
Okay.
productivity is productivity.
So just if you wouldn't mind then going back to your research, like what are you doing? What have you been up to recently? What are you working on at the moment?
So my PhD project was on trolls and online games, which is very Twitch appropriate.
Very
Um,
relevant, yeah.
so super relevant for Twitch TV. Twitch chat is an endless source of job security for me. Um, so I mostly focused on competitive games, generally speaking, just because they had a really specific culture, and you could really tap into that culture in the research. So I found that a lot of the research felt to me like it was jumping the gun. So it was talking about trolling, but it was jumping straight to prevention. So how do you stop trolls? You were hitting the content analysis game really hard, really fast. So you're trying to create basically really intelligent chat filters, for example. So really, I felt like they were just rushing it to really get to a point where we didn't have to deal with trolls anymore. From the perspective of the literature that I saw. Now, at the time, I was a psych student. I have since gone into more communications. I'm a little more interdisciplinary than I used to be. So now I have a better grasp on the literature. But at the time, in the world of psych, it was really all about prevention and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like I was really looking at actually understanding what was happening. Um, so the goal of my doctoral work was really to ask just the most basic questions possible, like who are trolls? What do they consider trolling? Why do they consider it trolling? What motivates them? What do the victims do? What do the bystanders do? Like just get a very fundamental picture of what trolling is. So that was more my doctoral work. Last year, when I did my weird kind of in between postdoc, I took a break from trolls and kind of not so much took a break from trolls, but I looked at the other side of the coin. I worked in a lab that dealt mostly with content moderation, and that was in New Jersey, New Jersey Institute of Technology. And that was interesting because it was a shifting from games into social media research more. Content moderation and the differences between paid content moderation and unpaid content moderation. So the idea of someone working for Facebook as a moderator versus someone who's a volunteer on a Reddit thread could be an example of comparison. And we still have some sort of outstanding projects where we're looking at content moderator mental health. I also do have a piece that I co-authored with several students from that lab that I was working in about discussing mental health in live streams. So I've kind of dipped back into my psych background a little bit to bring in the assist on that publication. And now I am doing my postdoc in Taiwan here at National Chengchi University in Taipei. And I'm kind of I'm starting my own research program, but I've also been working on existing labs. So the lab that I'm in does a lot of VR, so virtual reality. So I'm doing a lot of literature reviews for them to help them find VR type literature. And my own research that I'll be starting probably next month, I'll be working on data collection, getting that up and running, is specifically focusing on trolling victims. So going to clarify right away, this does not necessarily mean that all trolls are bad and everyone involved in trolls is a victim. I'm talking specifically about the people who are suffering from that because it's very easy to get the wrong idea that I think all trolling is bad and it's evil and needs to be eradicated and what have you. This specific project is focusing on interviewing victims. I'd love to do a longitudinal study of trolls and trolling, the trolling victims and how, because we really know nothing about the long-term effects right now. Everything is cross-sectional. So yeah, that's kind of the now to get a much more in-depth look at people specifically suffering from the.
It's really interesting actually, because I mean, even when you said there, like trolling, it's like I was able to pull a picture, like immediately of what I thought that was in my own brain, but no one has ever actually defined what that is. Like to me, no one has ever sat down and said, "Here is a textbook definition of what trolling is," but somehow my brain was able to put the pieces together, and it is really interesting because even like the bits of like mass media, I'm gonna say mass media that I've seen, I've always been around like, well, who are the trolls? We take person X to meet their troll and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there seems to be much less on like the, well, okay, but what happens if you've been trolled for a sustained period? What are the after effects of that? I mean, we could get into a whole discussion about, well, unless you're a celebrity, media doesn't care, but let's not go down that road. Just quite yet. So you've got quite a few skills in the wheelhouse. That's pretty good, and it sounds pretty exciting. I mean, for the sake of a non-academic audience, I don't want to focus too much on the research, but I could be like, tell me about your methodology. That would be me geeking out a little bit. I'll be honest. Um, so is there anything that that you'd like to mention, sort of work-wise? You sort of gave us like a nice spectrum. I do know, as a bit of a fanboy, you've done some work with Dr. Rachel Coa from Take This.
Yes, I have. So I think my most cited piece, which is super academic, it just means the thing I did that the most people read, was I was one of the first people to interview trolls. So that particular article, Under the Bridge, is my most known work, I guess, and it's probably the thing I'm still the most proud of done. Um, that one, it was interesting because, like you said, we have an idea of what trolls are, but very few people actually talk to them to find out. It's kind of our own idea that we've built up. Now, the obvious exception to this is Whitney Phillips, who's kind of the goddess of trolling research. Um, and I believe she infiltrated Anonymous, if I'm mistaken. It's been a while since I've read her or at least. Um, Now, to me, when you're talking about Anonymous, you're dealing less with trolling and more with vigilante hacking. There are arguments to be made on both ends, whether you consider them trolls or not. But I think she's the only person I can think of, time that I started, who had talked directly to trolls and published about it. Um, Later on, there were more, but I think that article that it was one of the first ones that really sat trolls down and interviewed them. So that's probably the thing I'm most known for academically. But I've also done lots of experiments. I've done surveys. I think the other big one that some people might know me for is I did a giant analysis of over 10,000 League of Legends reports, and tried to see if how trolls talk or how people that were reported to talk is different than how people that weren't reported talk. And what we found is that basically they sound the same. It's on a word for word level, it's actually very difficult to determine trolling is not a troll. Um, so that was kind of another big study, which seems like a really basic answer. It seems like a non-result, but actually it's quite interesting because, like you said, we have this really set idea of what trolling is. Actually looking at it piece by piece and its components, it's much harder to do. Let's talk about my work with Rachel or Dr. Coward. We noticed, this was a couple years ago now, I think. We were noticing there weren't a lot of prevalence statistics at the time. So basically, we knew that trolls existed, had no idea how many there were, had no idea how many people were actually dealing with them in terms of percentages. So we worked on really just getting statistics. Like, okay, in a sample of 300 gamers, this is not the exact numbers, but in a sample of 300 gamers, 89% of those people have been trolled something like that. So just really basic stats to give you an idea of approximately how big of an issue is this, and in those, what are people actually doing? Like when you're trolling, is it people swatting people? Which let's hope to God that's not the case, because that's literally illegal. Or is it more like friendly trash talking, kind of like, oh, dude, you suck, I'm gonna own you in this Twisted Tree Line 3v3, like whatever, that kind of thing. So we're trying to get a gauge on what the picture of trolling looks like. I think those would be the studies that I'm most known for, if you could call me known.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Those would be the one.
yeah, I know what you said, because I mean, like, if you're not familiar with academia, generally, like, we're our own little bubble. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you hear of people through other people, like, oh yeah, like, oh, and then you'll read that paper and you become a bit of a citation hopper. But like, you know, I get what you're saying. I think again, though, like, it's really interesting that you talk about the fact that you word for word there was no actual distinguishable difference, but in actual fact, like, because the first thing that came to my mind was that, like, well, yeah, because there's the context of what's being said, like word for word. We know, like, language is dumb and very bad at how it's used, and we're very bad at interpreting it. But also, like, you can say one thing to one group of people and say to another, and that completely, make someone want to report you. Do you know, for lack of a better terminology. And I think that is,
Absolutely.
because there have been times, like, when I've played online games, it's like been obvious that someone is like blatantly like trolling. I play a lot of Rocket League, for example, and someone is just toying with you. They're obviously better than you, but they're just pissing about. Pardon my French. And it's just like, okay, look, you've clearly better. Just finish the game, like, why, and stuff like that. Whereas that's just like you're obviously better. I don't bother reporting them. But if it's people that are like, say, like, even in a non-offensive way, but just like spamming slurs, then I'm like, no, you're gonna get reported, because that's just it's unsportsmanlike, as says the Brit in me.
It's no, I get it, and I would love to. That particular study, which was just an absolute beast, and I have to shout out Rihanna Konai, who was my collaborator. She did a bunch of the computational work on that one, because her programming is not where it needs to be to do what she was able to do with that amount of data. But that specifically was on the EUS server. I believe in the 20, I believe it was 2010, the year, or in around 2010. Not to data permitting, which if you study games at all, you'll know that's almost impossible to get data. I got very, very lucky with that data set. But data permitting, it would be really interesting to replicate that in different servers. Because I feel like what would get reported on an American server would be completely different than what would get reported on a Korean server, US server. I feel like online culture would also play more of a role than what I was able to capture in just studying in the US.
I mean, also just like a shout out just on getting data from games. Do you remember? It was in BBC News. I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was this study when the Oxford Institute of Internet Studies released the video game well-being study, and like it was like Animal Crossing and Plants vs Zombies, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, games like aren't bad for you," and I was like, "They gave them the data." Like the companies gave them the data. I was like, "What? Shut the front door!" And everyone was like, "What are you on about?" I was like, "This doesn't happen."
No, it really doesn't. Like I looked at that data set. It was some very kind Swedish man named Sven happened to post it on Reddit, and I was able to get access, and it disappeared like the next year. It was like this crazy thing, because he had been on back in the day. There was the tribunal system, so basically hiring players would tell the game company who they think should be punished based on the report received. So this Sven guy, bless you, Sven, wherever you are now. He had saved all of his reports from the entire time that he'd been in. That is my data file, and put it on Reddit, and here's a data file. Thank you, sir.
Sven, gone but not forgotten.
Yeah, Sven, my hero academia, Sven.
I'm gonna make that a quote on my channel.
Yeah.
Just like Sven, our academic hero.
He is
Oh,
forever.
no,
Sven.
that's so. It's just so.
I want to meet him someday.
Yeah, imagine. Oh man, that would be great. Like meeting your own data provider. That would be great. You know, like you have,
Boy.
you seen those programs like Long Lost Families? They can be like long lost data providers. Someone phoned Davina McCall at Channel 4 and they'll do it.
Oh my gosh, which is especially hilarious because my kid went to Cambridge during the time when Cambridge was in a bit of a scandal, and my direct supervisor was kind of directly involved in that scandal. Shout out to Cambridge Analytica. So data providers and I have a long and shaky history. Sven's a good.
Sven, gone but not forgotten, big man. Honestly. Let me just give my questions a little bit of a glance. Okay, so this is something I always like to. I feel like I'm asked a lot when I mention I research anything to do with games. But like, do you find yourself playing games when you're not working? Do you find yourself doing something completely different because it's work?
That's a good question. So I would say at the beginning, when I very first started, I was still gaming pretty regularly. I think still because you have to understand I'm Canadian. If you can't tell by the accent, my accent is very neutral even for a Canadian, so sometimes people don't know. So I'm Canadian, but I have not lived in Canada for 7 or 8 years now. I've been studying abroad and now I've been working abroad for the past 2 years. So games are the way that I kept in touch with my family. So my mom and my dad and I have a child. We would, I would get at an AR1 league with my dad, or we would sit down and have a LAN party at Heroes of Might Magic 3 with the three of us, and this was how I kept in touch with my family. I feel like nowadays I don't do that as much as I used to, although that actually might have more to do with me downgrading the computer because my board literally melted halfway through my friend's stream because I'm in Taiwan and it's hot country.
Yeah.
Oh, so I used to have a beautiful Alienware and now I do not. So I think part of it is that. But honestly, I probably play a lot more solo games. I am what is known as a Stardew Valley hard carry. I am the person, the go-to human for any and all Stardew Valley quotes and good questions and theories. So I think I do probably play more single player now than what I would have then.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag.
I mean, is that not a funny correlation of that you study trolling and then you decide actually, single player games are much better?
I know, right? Yeah, I think I think that a lot of people ruining time with my family, which is what initially started my research. Because I did my master's at Cambridge, and when you do your master's at Cambridge, not everyone understands what it's like to not have money.
Now we can have a real debate about classicism in England.
Oh yeah. So I did, like I said, there are some people who do, but my experience was that I kept asking professors where the grants were, and they kept telling me to follow my passion. There was a real divide going on there. It's like, what if I can't afford my passion though? I got annoyed, to be honest, with that answer. So I took passion in the opposite sense. I said, okay, what really ticks me off? And it was idiots in games ruining the only time that I had in my. So I said, okay, well, let's fix that. And thus an academic career was born.
I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to that. I'm going, yeah, same. Like pretty much. Just be
right?
like, what am I researching? Like video games and mental health, because mental health crises, video games could be helpful. Mm-hmm. No one's ever looked at it. Let's find out. Like,
right.
I always joke that like while everyone in like Psych is like going left and like Replication Crisis and all that, vis-a-vis Craig Anderson, let's not. I'm like I've just sort of turned right and just no one's noticed yet. Like there are
Yeah.
trickles and there are like bits and bobs, but there is no like empirical data, no sort of like experiments being conducted on this type of thing. A lot of the stuff that's been written is also like this is what we would like to see done, or this is like you know people like Dr. Kelly Dunlap, like write about game design from an ethical point of view, and these are the things that should be done from a game design perspective. You know, I've just like snuck in and I'm like, hey, is anyone doing this? No, I will.
Well, I would say that too, though, because I mean, there's enough psychologists to sink ship out there. Like you need to have some kind of funky angle if you want to get anything published. So, or at least if you want to get anything published that isn't the 12,000th eye tracking article on XYZ, like if you want to be a little bit original, which is very difficult in psych. I did it for 5 years. 5 years I did psych. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a slog sometimes because it's so established. I think it was one of the reasons I ended up going more interested route in the end. Um, I think I'm probably best qualified as media psychology. I think that's probably the moniker that describes what I do the closest. Um, I'm not really a psychologist anymore, but I'm also not really a communication scholar or a game studies person. I'm kind of like somewhere in this weird academic gray zone. Um,
So what we need
and media
is a
psychology
new title.
is the best.
Like,
Yeah, thing,
let's
academic thing.
yeah, let's make up like our own descriptor because we can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If Jack comes up with something that's not absolutely heinous, let me know.
Yeah, let's do that. Like we will try and work on that in the foreseeable. Okay, so like I went specifically down sort of video games because have you seen me? But what else do you like to get up to when you're not working? Just what hobbies, interests do you have?
These days, I've been watching a frightening amount of anime to the point where I'm worrying myself. But when you're in the house for a year and a half, like, what are you going to do? What's a girl going to do? There's so much to do. So these days, a frightening amount of anime. But other than that, if under slightly more normal circumstances, I love. I love. I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. Wind unrelated boat activities. So I don't do sailing, but I love kayaking, canoeing, rowing,
Jet
sculling.
skiing?
I live jet ski. I've never tried, but it sounds great. It sounds excellent. I'll call up Daniel Craig next time I'm in the area and we'll jet ski up into this because James Bond like
Oh yeah.
they regularly in place. Um, I love that water anything. I'm very happy. I enjoy cooking. Very difficult here. Apartments in Taipei do not come with very expensive kitchens unless you want to really shell out. But I do really enjoy cooking. What else do I do? I used to enjoy reading, and then I took an academia in the knee. Um, I have I still game every now and then, as is evidenced by that super old meme. And I have a very old YouTube channel that I haven't been active on in ages that I recently.
Okay, so you are certainly a bit of a busy bee, which is good.
Again, not right now. under under non pseudo house arrest.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, so you mentioned you haven't done jet skiing. Is there anything else that like you? I was gonna say have tried recently. That's maybe the most recent thing you tried, or is it something like really up at the top of the list that you want to try next?
Is a friend of mine gave me. I believe the official name is five gut soup. Um, it's like five different internal organs in a soup.
Sounds delicious.
It was, I mean, honestly, it was quite bland compared to what the title would suggest. Um, but I think that's probably the most recent thing that I've tried because I haven't had a whole lot of opportunities here yet. Um, Also, just trying to get my Mandarin, trying to just speak to people in Mandarin, still very scary. Efforts are made. Things that I would like to try, um, other than jet skiing, I would I would really like to try. I want to try learning the guzheng, which is a musical instrument around here. I play a lot of music. Like that's something I didn't mention because I've had to kind of put it on the back burner with PhDs. As if you haven't already learned, you will soon learn things that on the back burner. But it's like a kind of a harp type instrument. A friend of mine lent me hers, and I've been kind of messing around with it. But I would like to try actually in my own and learning how to.
That sounds pretty cool. I mean, so do you play any other instruments? Like, tell me. I mean, I'm a huge music fan. I mean,
Hey,
I
yeah.
mean,
So my
again, like,
main
I'm a white guy with a beard and square glasses. Of course, I play acoustic guitar.
naturally, all you
Eh,
need to do is dye it red, and then you're a dead ringer. Hugh I shall not name because it is evident. Um, uh, yeah, no. So my main instrument would be bass. I've been a bassist for a long time, although I haven't really played properly in probably 6 years because I was never able to take it with me. So I left Canada when I was 22, so that would have been 7 years ago. So I haven't really played bass since then. But that I would still consider that the instrument I'm most comfortable with. But I've also played glockenspiel, flute, piccolo, a bit of self-taught piano. I've been lessons for a very long time. I do play acoustic guitar, but that's 100% self-taught. So um, ukulele, same thing. Learning the guzheng, and I also did some vocal work as well back in the day. Um, so yeah, a whole bunch of different things.
I mean, that is a pretty varied repertoire and assortment. I mean, you could
Yes,
literally do your own orchestra.
it'd be a weird semi orchestra. I do it.
But you'd have some slap and bass, which is, the main thing.
I was trained. I was trained jazz, but the most recent time I would have played bass would have been more metal. Um, Specifically, I think the last song I would have learned would have been Death. Breakfast Mountain, I think was the last like bass song that I learned how to play for a performance.
Oh, okay, that's pretty interesting. I mean, have you got any, like, big performances under your belt? Like, I don't know. Biggest crowd you've ever
Years ago,
wooed?
years ago, where I was actually performing. I don't remember. I totally blank out when I'm on stage. I don't notice anything. I'm such a bassist. I like this, and I am every stereotype of bass. So I literally don't know. But yeah, performances maybe 100, maybe 100. If being generous, last time I performed, that would have been 10 years ago at least. Oh,
I mean, that's still pretty impressive, and I'm sure more people than most people have performed too. I mean, I'm
reflections in a
like
minute.
not like like I'm impressed, but I mean, I wish I had that any level of that type of talent to be able to wield that many instruments. I'll be honest. I mean, as I say, I jokingly I'm like, oh yeah, I can play acoustic guitar, but I like it. I can do a little bit of electric as well. I can play, like, I can make music come out of a piano, but I don't know how to play one. If that makes sense. Like,
My entire repertoire on piano is Lufia 2, Chrono Cross, and Final Fantasy 9 music. So like piano, I literally pick a song and then I just spend like 3 weeks just learning that song. I have no idea if my technique is right. I just want to hear the music.
I mean, just casually dropping like Chrono Cross Final Fantasy music. Like, wow, just easy as that.
Not perfect, but it's doable. I do miss having a piano. I would love to get one.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. I have to ask then. Like I know we're gonna mention it a little bit later, but video game soundtracks, favorites. I mean,
Yeah.
Chrono Cross, Final Fantasy there.
Yasunori Mitsuda, or Mitsuda Yasunori is the greatest. Anything by him. Also Nobuo Uematsu, or I keep saying their names backwards. Uematsu Nobuo. Those two are easily like far and away my favorite video game soundtrack. So those would be Mitsuda Yasunori-san is the Chrono series. He did Chrono Trigger, Chrono. Also, a week old and made that soundtrack. It's the only soundtrack I've ever purchased. Like actually, I bought it from my boyfriend at the time, now husband. He got it for me. I think he was in Montreal all the time, and I was like freaking out. I've been looking for it for years.
Was that like the moment that you
anything.
knew boyfriend should be husband?
No, he carried my bass. He volunteered to carry my bass, and no one had ever volunteered to carry my bass. 14 years ago. 14 years ago. Here we are. Yeah, it was that was a stellar moment. Such for me. But yeah, I think those are probably my favorite. And Noble Amos. He did a whole bunch of Final Fantasy, and he also did Luca 2, which is still one of my favorite Super Nintendo games ever.
Nice.
So those would be my chef's kiss.
I've got to obligatorily ask, which is your favorite Final Fantasy game and soundtrack if you had to pick one? You don't have to defend the decision. I'm not going to put you through that, but you do have to try and pick one if you can.
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying this is the most controversial thing I think I've ever said on any stream ever.
Brace yourself, chat. Brace yourself.
I've never played Final Fantasy VII. It's, I think, the only one that I haven't played. I know, right?
Any interview, right? That's it. Like, I'm out.
I know. It's like saying to someone that you've never seen Star Wars. It's like, where have you been? What are you doing? What have you done with your life? So, VII is the only one that I haven't played, but I know the story because you can't not know the story. It's impossible. So my favorite one, though, actually is purely based on the memories associated with it. So I received Final Fantasy IX for Christmas one year, and I just remember playing it, and I was super unhappy at the time. This is a mental health stream, so I was like hardcore panic attack, depressed, the whole shebang at the time that I received that game for Christmas. And I remember opening it in my Christmas stocking because my parents are old school and I'm 29. I still their Christmas stocking. And it was in my stocking, and I just remember sitting down and basically spending the entire Christmas just binging my Fantasy 9. And I remember getting a specific brand of hand sanitizer. It was like a Purell hand sanitizer. And I remember just smelling that, eating chocolate and playing Final Fantasy 9 and just being happy for the first time in such a long time. And yes, Final Fantasy 9 has like a really special place for me. So it has to be my favorite, but it probably, if I were to do it in an objective like overview, probably actually number. But in the early ones, the numbering is weird. So to me, it's Final Fantasy 4, but I feel like in Japan, it might not be. It might be 2 or 3.
Who's the main character?
His name again. I always rename him. It's Lena, Galuf, and Varys.
Final Fantasy 5.
hair, pink. 5. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
okay.
You. Oh, the numbering got weird.
Yeah, it's very strange, the numbering, but yeah, don't worry about that yet. We worked it out. It's all good.
We got it out. But that one probably, like, from an objective standpoint, that one was probably my favorite to play. But Final Fantasy 9 is my favorite
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm gonna openly first say that you need to play Final Fantasy VII.
I
Uh,
know.
I will say that, and it's funny because like I you know a few people, particularly a streamer called Death Unites, who's known as like the Final Fantasy VII guy, slash god, depending on who you speak to. But it's really interesting that like like many people I think in the West, Seven was the first one that I played, so it's the one that I have the strongest sort
Mm.
of childhood feelings attached to. Like many hours as a wee boy playing that. Um, but I don't think objectively it's the best. It's literally held together with duct tape. And like I've beaten all 1 through 10. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean just a little flex there. Little flex. And it's funny only having like recently watched that streamer in particular play through 6 and connect the dots himself. How much they actually just took from 6 and just put into 7 and kind of like gave it like a different wrapping. It's really funny how overlapped they are. Because of like they knew exactly what they were doing. It was the first one that they really properly hoped to do well in the West. Um,
Mhm.
so similar to yourself, I think 7 is like my personal favorite. It's just the one I've enjoyed the most. However, I think objectively 9 is the best. At least
In that decision.
until like and no spoilers, but like the last act, the last quarter of the plot.
It's not very rushed. Like there was like a lot happening. That's where it's like, what?
It's like
This came out of nowhere.
because the game is like actually like really broad and like I like the pace
It
and it
is.
really builds nicely and
Yeah.
then like you get to like disc 4 and it's like we need to end the game, like, squish everything
Exactly.
together.
Exactly. So yeah, I fully support that read. I agree.
I mean Vivi has to be one of, or Vivi depending on your preferred pronunciation, has to be one of the best characters of all time. Freya as well,
My
like
heart. My heart. I can't. Dear goodness. Oh, you gotta learn Taiwan's emergency number before you bring BD up in conversation.
don't worry if exclamation mark this in the chat, take you straight to take this org. uh
Need support. Jeez. Heartbreaker. Oh, so
uh
good. So good with the emotion.
oh yeah, it's all good. Um, we have someone's in chat just put that if you think a little deeper, and you meant to be thought like the ending actually makes sense, and I think that's fair. I think it does make
Mm,
sense. It just definitely felt a bit
it
rushed
does.
and was like a bit wild.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I honestly think
I
like
wish disc 4 was longer.
yeah, and I think that just like just for me, I love the system. Like what the system. I mean, I love the materia system,
Mm.
but I love the fact that there are strict classes. I love the fact that it's like each party member has their own use. I think the way the party is
Yeah.
divided at various points is very well done. There's a few curveballs in there. I won't spoil for spoilers. But I just think the whole balance between the parties that you can have is really nice, and the way that you learn abilities is really nice, particularly as someone who is a serial grinder in RPGs.
Same. Same. I'm a bit of a completionist. I have leveled more than reasonable people should probably level character.
I'm like 10
So
hours in, and everyone's like, why are you still on disc 1? I'm like, because I need every ability in case I come up against the boss that wants to poison me. I need that. I just want to be ready.
and do you also never use items like ever on pain of death? Because
Like,
I
yeah,
never use items.
yeah, like up until I did, like I actually streamed it, but I did a Final Fantasy VII challenge run. But like up
Okay.
until then, like just never. Like items like too precious. You've got 99 potions, don't want to use them.
That would ruin it. Like then your pile's gone. What if you run out?
I know. Like, and what if I need this one elixir? Like, but you find them all the time. But what if I stop finding them? And then I'm in that boss fight or like an optional, like your super boss. That's when I'm going to need them.
So
Out of
yeah,
interest, have you
I'm very much
beaten
the same.
have you beaten any of the super bosses on any of the games?
Oh, I'm certain I have. Although I have to admit, I was a much more casual Final Fantasy person than I was with other series.
Okay.
So games where because Final Fantasy, I really played the story. If I played a Final Fantasy game, or I played a max out on chunks. So those are kind of the two ways that I'll play Final Fantasy. But in terms of like finding all the secrets, beating everything, doing everything, basically most Super Nintendo JRPGs, I will have done that. But in terms of ones that you're presumably younger than me, audience, I've actually played the Chrono series. I would have 100% maxed out, done absolutely everything in both of those games. I think another Bon Kato series for any GameCube players. Adore that series. The voice acting was shaky. I agree with people on that. But other than the voice acting, I would have maxed out, done everything in Bon Katos as well. Yeah. I think those would be more the ones. Although I do believe in Final Fantasy 9, I have beaten most of the super bosses that were available in that one. But it's been so many years now that I couldn't tell you their names. Like if you showed me the video clip, I could probably say, "Oh yeah, I did that one."
Okay. Fair.
But top of my head, I can't remember because it's been eight.
So, Dr. Chrissy, Final Fantasy 9 playthrough live on Twitch when?
I mean, I have to get the emulator running. I don't have a PS1 anymore.
I mean, you can get Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on you can play it on your toaster nowadays. Like,
I mean, I also would need a toaster. That's not really a thing in Asia.
oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
So yeah, get me a toaster, get me a potato, and
Yep, we'll be flying.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, and again, I don't want to over consume my game chat, but I mean, I've played Chrono Trigger. I've watched the playthrough of Chrono Cross. I haven't finished Chrono Trigger. I'll be honest. I got stuck because it's it's not easy.
It's an old school game. It's an old school. They want you to work for it.
But I remember watching a playthrough of Chrono Cross and just going, "This is the wildest RPG that I have seen in a long time." The character roster is huge. There's and obviously just having a huge character roster with people you can find and stuff adds a ton of replayability. But it also is pretty hard the way the elements stack and work. And again, I watched the Let's Play and that final boss, and no spoilers, but how are you meant to work that out natively? How do you do? I watched that and I was running my brain like a max clock and speed, and I was like, how do you work that out? Is there a clue or something? Because it just seems so far fetched.
It's pretty wild. So you have to be a lore master, basically. You have to know exactly the lore. You pretty much have to have played Chrono Trigger all the way through, I think, because the lores tie in, especially at the end. I'll say you can play the two games separately and never play either one and enjoy them as possible. But if you've played Trigger, Chrono Cross is spiritual experience. It's a new level. So you have to know the lore. Preferably you have to play Chrono Trigger as well. Clue is actually in the music. You have to know the music to be able to beat Final Boss. Which, as an absolute Mitsuda-san fangirl, made me happy. I was all about that life. But yeah, it is. It's crazy. But I'm gonna give you an anecdote here. So again, I'm going to avoid spoilers. So I had one friend growing up who was the closest thing I had to a gamer friend, I would say, because I didn't really make my gamer friends until I was in my mid-20s. But she was the closest I had to a gamer friend, and we played Chrono Cross together. We would get together on the weekends or after school, and would sit in her basement and I was kind of the strategy expert, if you will. So I would take over the battles
if you will, so casually, I was a strategy expert.
Consider we were both 12-year-old girls. I was a strategist. So I took over the battles and stuff, and she would help, decide what course of action we were going to take, which character we were going to choose, because as you said, the character roster was giant, like 200 characters or something stupid like that. So that at one point we got stuck, and we had been working on this one fight. Oh gosh, the amount of loads that I must have tried this thing like 40 times easily. Realistically, now I just know we were under leveled. Back then, it's like, I don't know, beat this thing if it kills me. And one day we had our other friend over, and my gamer friend, she was really insistent, like, okay, we've got to beat him today. We've got to beat this character. And when you get to this particular boss fight, and it's kind of like, I would say the midpoint, so he's a huge difficulty spike. He's way harder than anything you fought until this point. But you don't know who he is, so he doesn't have a name when you first see him. So his name shows up because, of course, it's a JRPG. There's text. He's giving you a bunch of philosophical ideas because it's Chrono Cross. And it just shows up as a man. So my friend who had never played the game and who had heard us, me and my gamer friend talking about it all the time, she looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the world. She's like, Chrissy, I've been trying to beat this crazy boss is named Man. No, you just don't know his name. We just died laughing hysterically. It's like the ultimate boss, Man. That's still my favorite Chrono Cross memory ever. Just that she was convinced that we had dedicated the last 2 weeks to beating Man. It was a very like all your base are belong to us kind of moment.
And you know what, the philosophy's there. The biggest challenge we all face, the ultimate boss battle is Man.
So it's like this multi-layer moment, like spit chocolate melt through your nose kind of wish. Whenever I think of Chrono, I remember those two.
That's great, and I love kind of like moments like that. I mean, the closest thing I think I've had is, funnily enough, with Final Fantasy IX. But me and I've only beat it once, and that time was actually a full co-op playthrough with like one of my closest friends over a number of years. Because on the OG PS1 version, you could do multiplayer where people could control different party members in battle, right? And we did the whole game that way over, I think, literally like 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
Like with like amazing. no dedicated time to it. If we were just like we're having a sleepover, it would be like, oh, do you want to do some Final Fantasy? It'd be like, yeah or no. And like that was great, and it was like a similar experience to that type of thing. We were working on it. Like I do all the chocograph stuff. We'd be there with like a map, like twisting it around about. I'm just digging everywhere. And I think what I love about that is that you're getting that type of experience from a game that is quintessentially like single player. And like you get, I mean, that's how they're a community. I mean, we're on Twitch, but the whole sort of like emphasis on communities around that type of thing, I think, is something that is great and really draws me to the platform, even during its challenging growth periods. But that's great. I mean, so you're definitely a hardcore RPG gamer, which is good. I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think one of the most recent is I absolutely binged Bravely Default, all Bravely Defaults, fully maxed out, all characters, full level 99, all jobs, fully maxed.
All right, I'm gonna throw up a spoiler warning because I've not actually met anyone else who's beaten the first Bravely Default, and we need to talk about the end of that game. So spoiler warning: if you don't want to hear the end of this game, which is absolutely wild, like just put us on mute.
I will do this. I'll do this when it's okay to unmute. When you see this again, it means it's okay to unmute. Okay.
So if you don't want spoilers, I mean, if you don't care, keep listening. But if you do care, now mute.
Yeah.
All right. What the heck is going on at the end of that game?
I know, right? Like, and they need to bring Ringabel back. They haven't brought him back. I've played 2 games waiting for Ringabel to make reappearance, and he's still not there. I need to figure out what's going on.
I've not played the second of the new End Layer or the second one, but firstly, Bravely Default is not easy. I think like the battle is like
No.
really tactical, really like really rich and good for that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Very easy to break, which is great, particularly if you're a fan of leaving your DS on sleep mode. Um, you can break
Absolutely.
that with minimal effort. Like fun fact, I actually broke the final boss's like final health gate, where his health resets because I used the SP move and just did it with
Yeah.
maximum weakness and broke the health gate, so he skipped the form.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But like that game is just what like okay, so again with the spoiler warning in place, so you have to go. You're the four warriors of light. You go get the crystals and do all the business, and then next thing you know, everything resets, and you're like, what the honk? And then like you can go back and refight all the bosses again, but they're harder. Then and you go get the crystals again, and they're all harder. But then it happens again, and this sort of cycle repeats itself. I think for like 4 chapters,
Something like that. It is long,
and
and you are so confused.
yeah, like you're so, but like all the bosses, and then eventually the bosses like start to regroup, but in weird combinations. Like I will fully admit, I got to that point and just got up a guide because I was like, what the heck is going on?
No, same, same. I see. I had beaten it the bad way first, um, because I clued into Airy, and I was like, "Oh, we're not supposed to do this with crystals," so I didn't. And but that's actually the bad ending. So you actually need to follow it all the way through. And for me to figure that out, I did look it up in the end.
I remember the
So I was
first
like,
time
he was wrong.
I got to like the point where like it was obvious that there were ulterior motives going on, and it was like, and I
Yes.
like yourself, I had twigged that maybe you just if you keep pressing the crystal, what happens, and you have to do it for a while as well. Um,
Yeah.
and like I remember the first time I booted it up, and like the menu screen, the main menu screen changed from like where the fairy flies
Mm,
to airy lies, and like it's
Very
red,
lies.
and
Yeah.
like and the music changes, and I've like I played like
Uh-huh.
some horror games and been less scared than that
Mhm.
moment. Like that was
I know.
terrifying. And then like just to throw all that under the bus, the actual boss is literal nightmare fuel.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Like
A little scary.
don't look it up if you have a weak constitution, but like oh my goodness, it's like and even then that's got like in the bad ending you've got like 4 forms or whatever, and if you do
Hmm.
the full game you have to do another entire dungeon
Yeah.
plus that boss fight with an additional 4 forms plus the final boss fight with like 8 forms.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband definitely remembers me disappearing 3 times over the course of our marriage when each of the 3 people came out. I was just gone for a week. It's like, oh, well, see you
And
takes
it's
over.
good. Like it's all good. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. It's
yeah.
all good. Like it's a great game. And like when
It
you
is.
beat a boss, it's got like 3/4 of a million HP. Feels pretty badass. Let's be honest. Like it does. But oh my
Yeah.
days, that was just wild. And like I've got End Layer, but I haven't played it yet.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I do believe like they tweaked a lot of stuff. Like they made the grinding a lot easier, and because like again, Bravely Default it has a job system. It kind of does the FF5 thing where you can link jobs and skills from other jobs, and that's it's so good, so well done. But because of that, you're gotta get your grind on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's why I disappeared for a week. Just like, okay, I need everyone to 99 and we're going to get
Yeah.
all jobs and we're going to totally fix it. Yeah, yeah. So
What
I,
what are
yeah,
your
but definitely the
what are your go-to job combinations? Then I've got to ask.
um, I tend to have at least, well, at the end, once you've maxed everyone out, everyone's a freelancer. Their stats get boosted based on how many jobs you've mastered. And you get to choose their specialties and their abilities based on anything. So I pretty much always have 4 freelancers at the end because they're fully max stats if I do that. But I will usually have one person who's basically a white mage, one person who's basically a black mage, and then I'll have one utility and one warrior type. So I've always been a monk fan. Uh, I like the unarmed. Red mages can be good. Oh, I feel like they're better in mid game than end game. Yeah, I just totally max out the stats outrageously. That's the main thing I do.
I'll be fair, I didn't max everything out, but like on my like Bravely Default playthrough, I think I ended the game with like a knight who was like just tanking, just dual shielding. No, sorry, it was a pirate with like knight abilities, so I could boost and then
Yeah,
like attack with ferocity. Um,
yeah.
the like you get like an improved version of a white mage that like absorbs elemental damage. I forget what that's called, like a geomancer or something.
Geomancer, Summoner. Summoner has similar abilities
But
as
like
well, and it changes. It changes depending on each game because they have slightly different. Like they're basically the same jobs
yeah, yeah.
across each one. But I would have played the third installment most recently, so that's what's fresh in my brain. It's not remembered from the first
And
one,
then I had a
but I know what
performer.
you mean.
I had a performer because you could spam
Mm,
like BP moves, which is excellent. And then I had a hunter because like again, and that's how I broke the final boss. They have like
yes.
a damage limit breaking set. So you could
Mm-hmm.
right. So you could buy them, the like SP drinks, but you could stop time
Yes.
and use a special move that you could just hit the boss with anything. So you could do that after you had like broken their defenses and open them up to a
Yeah.
critical hit. And then the hunter, who was just a ranger basically, had like a special move
Yeah.
that you could do type damage. So it was like dragon type
Mm,
damage with like 3 attack
yes.
buffs, their lower defense.
Yeah.
I did literally like 50,000 damage. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think Hunter on whoever is my main attacker. Usually, I use the Hunter specializations. The Hunter on that freelance.
Okay, so I think
I agree.
that spoilers done there. I think yeah, we're good. Spoiler end of
Okay,
spoilers.
come back, everyone. You're free.
Uh, obviously, it is spoiler free. Would you recommend Bravely Default 2 on the Switch?
I would, yeah, I would recommend all of the Bravely Default series. I will say, you really have to be a JRPG fan. If you aren't, then it is way too grindy. Especially the most recent one. You pretty much have to be max level if you're gonna beat it. Like it's very, very grindy. Um, so if that's what you're into to put Flood of the Concord, then yes. But if you are not pretty hardcore about your JRPGs, then I would probably skip.
Well, you heard it here first. Get that quoted. Dr. Chrissy Cook says
Yeah,
it. Hardcore fans only.
yeah. For especially for the most recent one, it's like I had everyone maxed out fully, and I still struggled.
Flipping
So
heck.
yeah,
Not for babies, as they would say.
no, definitely not a baby game. At least not if you want to beat it the right way.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. We actually like huge tangent there. I am aware of time as well. I don't want to keep you for too long. Um. So what else have we got? Okay. So. What have you got coming up next? You kind of have talked about that work-wise a little bit, so that's okay. This is a nice sort of blue sky question, but if you had no
Okay.
limitations, so unlimited budget, access to any data or participants, what would your research project be? I'll start with mine, just to give you a preface.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm wearing a
Okay.
Celeste t-shirt, but mine would be to
You are.
just get people to play Celeste longitudinal and just record them like all the way through it, like their experience with it, how they felt, how difficult they found it, did they beat A, B, C side and farewell, like because not only is the mental health wonderful and I think very transformative and I had a beautiful experience with it, the game is just also amazing in its own right, and like the effect, just the paper's title would be the transformative effect of playing Celeste, and it would just be like this huge participant base over a longitudinal scale between start and finishing the game, and like I would bank my hypotheses would be this will change things in many ways for the better, with maybe the odd broken controller.
Celeste is not easy. Um, I would hire an army of translators. Um, I would have access to all of Activision Blizzard, Valve, and Riot Games' data, and I would do a 10-year study, cross-region, cross-platform study of trolling at all the different competitive levels across uh, servers, cross servers, in MMOs, MOBAs, all of this, and basically do the ultimate longitudinal study of gamers around the world. I think that is what I would do. And the paper would just be called Chrissy Defies of Statistics. This is an unrealistic world. Multiple models, my hearts and desires. And I would look at genre, I would look at culture, look at culture, and put that into one giant model to end all model.
That would be amazing, to be fair.
I mean, it would be my career. That would be it. That would be the whole thing.
I would go so far as say as like
retire.
that would be not just a study, that would be the study. No more research would be needed after that.
No, it would just be done. Just be like, all right, dust off my hands. I'm gonna go retire to Fiji. Peace out, guys. Off I go.
So if you're watching / listening to this and you'd like to help fund this wonderful bit of research, let us know. Drop us a comment in the emails. Yeah, !mark guest in the chat. All those links will be there. Do get in touch.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean,
that's the dream.
I admire the scope, you know, like, and I think that's how you've got to look at it, because I think
that's how I'm gonna.
Well, the beautiful thing about that though is that I think in many ways, if you imagine that as like a jigsaw, you're kind of slowly putting the pieces in there just with the work you're doing. And I think that's in my mind, that's good, sensible, achievable goals, and I quite like that.
This is how I'm going to get published in both Nature and Science.
Nice.
That study. That's how it's going to happen.
Okay, so before we finish, sort of quick fire-ish questions. Full disclosure to chat, I did send the questions over ahead of time, so you had a little bit of time to think about it. But, you know, one of each. You're allowed to. I did nick this from Desert Island Discs. I'm not afraid to admit it. But you know, you're allowed one film, one album, one book, and one video game on your retirement in Fiji. And that's all you're allowed to have, nothing else. What do you pick?
So for the movie, the film, Paprika, I am not a movie person at all. That is my all-time favorite movie. Hard recommend for anyone in psych, because there's so much young and Freud. It is just fun. It's also one of the films that inspired Inception. So if you like Inception, you will probably like Paprika. Beautiful soundtrack, beautiful animation, super interesting story. For the book, I'm gonna go with Tigana by Guy Gabriel Kay. I guess Guy Gabriel Kay is probably the closest I could get to being a stan of something. I've read everything that man has ever written. I actually got to meet him once, and I wouldn't be surprised if he remembered me by just like the anime eyes that I probably had, just meeting him in the flesh. Handpicked my Tolkien successors to work with Silmarillion, seeing all these stuff. Tigana openly wept at the end of that book. Amazing book. Again, hard recommend. Or, oh, geez, for video game. For my favorite video, I feel like my favorite video game of all time would be different than the video game I would want for my retirement in Fiji. The retirement in Fiji game that I would genuinely get the most use of would be Stardew Valley, like without
infinite replayability.
Infinite replayability. But I'm gonna get honest deserted island in the future. I'm going to say a very hopeful Elder Scrolls 6 Hammerfell. And hopefully not the too distant future. And the last one was album, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta rep my voice and the lady back here in Taiwan and go with Takasago Army of Exponent.
Okay, that's fair. I appreciate the rep going on. But
Taiwan love.
that's all my questions. Do you have any questions for me? Anything you want to ask?
It has been driving me slightly mad. Is that Deku from My Hero Academia on your bookshelf in the background? It is slightly blurry, but I can't tell.
Whereabouts?
Third shelf down. It looks like a blurry. Yeah, right there.
Oh,
right there.
that's all. That's all Dragon Ball.
Well, Dragon Ball. Okay, the green hair was throwing me. The green hair was throwing me. It looks green in this lighting.
So I've got like Dragon Ball, like the original, like as a box set, and then the Viz Big versions of Z, and then like you can't see it 'cause it's behind me, but I've got the versions of Super as well. I've got the latest versions of them.
That's what it is. Okay. I was just it was driving me a little crazy. I'm like, I know that character kind of looks like a My Hero Academia character, but it's blurry, so I can't tell. Thank you. That was my question.
That's why I put in a you can ask me something, because heavens to Betsy, we'd have finished this interview and you walked away going, I'll never know what that anime character is.
No, it's like I said, it's what I've been doing for the past year, so I need to know these things.
Right, well, I hope everyone has enjoyed listening. I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Dr. Chrissy Cook, thank you so much for joining me and being my very special guest. This on the first ever Psyched to be with you. It's been an excellent time for me. Hopefully, be able to do some more of these in the future. But in the meantime, we're going to say goodbye. So we're just going to move over to the ending screen when I can find it. There it is. Thank you so much for watching. As ever, always look after your mind, body, and soul. And we will see you again very, very soon.